Captain Amanda Hayes pressed her back against the crumbling concrete wall, her breath steady despite the chaos erupting around her. The Orcs hadn't expected resistance. Not like this. Their initial invasion plans had dismissed Earth as a Category 3 pre-FTL civilization, anticipating an easy victory against primitive projectile weapons and basic armor. That assumption had cost them dearly in the first 48 hours of the war. Razor 6, this is Razor Actual, she whispered into her comm, keeping her voice low as another volley of plasma fire scorched the air above her position. Status report. Still breathing, Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the static. Third Squad has the aliens pinned down in the office complex. They're not going anywhere. Amanda allowed herself a grim smile. The 75th Rangers had been conducting urban warfare drills in Detroit when the first Orcs ships appeared in orbit. While the rest of the world scrambled to respond, her battalion had immediately shifted from training to real-world combat. The aliens' arrogance in landing their ground forces in the middle of an American city with an active military presence would prove to be their first of many mistakes. Through her tactical display, Amanda watched the alien life signs clustered in the building across the street. The Orcs soldiers were technically superior in every way. Stronger, faster, with natural armor that could deflect small arms fire. But they were also predictable, inflexible, and completely unprepared for human combat doctrine. All units, execute Phase 2, she ordered, her voice calm and measured. The response was immediate. A chorus of Rogers from her company. The trap had been Amanda's idea, inspired by centuries of human urban combat experience. While the Orcs remained fixated on their tactical displays and combat computers, her Rangers had been moving through maintenance tunnels and service corridors, positioning themselves for a three-dimensional assault that alien doctrine never considered possible. The first explosion rocked the building's foundation. The Orcs commander's panic transmission was intercepted and automatically translated. Impossible. Their weapons cannot breach our armor. But the explosions weren't meant to breach anything. They were a distraction, covering the sound of Rangers rappelling from the roof and breaching through windows. By the time the aliens realized they were under attack from above, it was too late. The next few minutes were chaos, the kind of close-quarters combat that humans had perfected over millennia of warfare. Amanda led her platoon through the breach point, her trained eyes tracking targets through the dust and debris. The Orcs fought back with devastating energy weapons, but they couldn't match the speed and precision of the Rangers' room-clearing techniques. What happened next would become legendary in alien military archives. An Orcs plasma bolt caught Sergeant Miller in the chest, burning through his armor. By all alien combat models, a wound of that severity should have immediately incapacitated any sentient being. Instead, Miller kept fighting, his combat stimulants and natural adrenaline keeping him in the fight long enough to eliminate 3 more enemies before finally allowing himself to be evacuated. The Orcs commander's final transmission, captured for future analysis by alien war colleges, contained a note of genuine fear. They don't stop. By the void, they don't stop when they're wounded. What kind of species evolved to fight through injuries that would kill any rational being? Amanda stood in the secured command center 20 minutes later, watching medics treat her wounded while the rest of her company secured their prisoners. The alien commander stared at her with all 4 of his eyes, mandibles twitching in what she would later learn was an expression of profound confusion. "You were supposed to be primitive," he said through the translator. "Your species hasn't even achieved unified planetary government or FTL travel." Amanda checked her weapon, her movements deliberate and practiced. "No," she replied, "but we've been fighting wars since before we invented writing. Your combat computers can't calculate the value of experience like that." As she turned to leave, the alien called out, "What are you?" Amanda paused in the doorway, not looking back. "We're human. And you just learned why that's the most dangerous thing to be in this galaxy." Major James Iron Man Rodriguez wiped the frost from his tactical visor, his breath forming crystals in Proxima B's brutal -60-degree air. His 6-person Special Forces team had been moving continuously for 72 hours, tracking an Orcs mechanized column through the planet's endless polar night. Any other species would have succumbed to exhaustion days ago. But humans were built different. Movement, 2 clicks north. Sergeant Sarah Scout Wilson whispered through the team channel. Their rear guard is starting to stagger. James allowed himself a small smile. The Orcs hadn't stopped moving since his team destroyed their command vehicle, convinced that maintaining constant motion would prevent the humans from organizing an effective attack. They didn't understand that humans had evolved as persistence hunters, that running from us only triggered something primordial in our brains. They're breaking formation, Lieutenant Mark Ghost Peterson added, his voice steady despite the bone-chilling cold. The cold's getting to their environmental systems. Guess they didn't design them for extended use. The Orcs had superior technology in every way. Powered armor that could shrug off most human weapons, sensors that could detect movement from kilometers away, and energy weapons that could vaporize targets with a single shot. What they didn't have was humanity's endless endurance. All right, stalkers, James broadcasted to his team. They're finally starting to crack. Time to show them why humans are the galaxy's apex predators. The hunt had started 3 days ago when the Orcs force, 200 strong, attempted to flank the main human defensive line at Steel Valley. James and his team had been tasked with delaying them. Instead of a conventional ambush, he chose to employ tactics that would have been familiar to humanity's earliest hunters. First, they isolated the command vehicle with precisely placed demolition charges. Then they began their relentless pursuit, never directly engaging but constantly harassing the Orcs force. A sniper shot here, a demolished bridge there, always staying just out of reach, while forcing the aliens to keep moving. Their rear guard just lost another walker, Sarah reported. They're down to 8 operational vehicles now. The rest are running on emergency power or abandoned. James checked his team's vitals on his HUD. Everyone was tired, but their specialized training and natural biology kept them functioning at peak efficiency. The stims in their system weren't for staying awake. They were just to dull the pain of constant motion. Remember what we learned in training, he reminded his team. Our ancestors didn't need to be stronger than their prey. They just needed to be more persistent. We got 200,000 years of evolution backing us up. The next phase began as the polar night's temperature dropped even further. The Orcs' powered armor, designed for short, intense battles, began failing under the strain of constant use. Their formation, once tight and disciplined, started to show gaps. They're trying to call for extraction, Lieutenant Lisa Ciffer-Martins reported from her position monitoring their communications. But we're still jamming their long-range signals. James activated his thermal vision, watching the heat signatures of the alien force grow weaker as their systems failed one by one. Time to end this. Execute final phase. What happened next would be studied in alien war colleges for decades. 6 humans, moving through conditions that would kill most species, systematically dismantled a force 40 times their size. They struck from multiple directions, using the darkness and terrain to their advantage. Always moving, never presenting a target. The Orcs commander's final transmission, intercepted by Lisa, captured the terror of their final moments. They never stop. We can't shake them. How can they keep moving? What kind of hell world spawns creatures with such endurance? Hours later, as his team secured the last survivors, James found the commander half frozen in his disabled walker. "Why didn't you just kill us quickly?" the alien asked through chattering mandibles. James checked the prisoner's restraints before responding. "Because the galaxy needs to learn what humanity is capable of. You're not just fighting soldiers. You're fighting the result of an evolutionary arms race that made us the most dangerous hunters Earth ever produced." The commander's translator crackled with his response. "You're not soldiers. You're something much worse. You're persistence predators." "Exactly," James said, signaling for evac. "And the galaxy just learned why you never run from a human. It only triggers the hunt." Colonel Michael Ghost Thompson stood at the shattered windows of the New Petersburg Colonial Administration building, watching the Orcs forces regroup for their 7th assault in 3 days. Their previous attacks had cost them nearly a third of their force, yet they still couldn't comprehend how a garrison of just 500 humans was holding the city. "Sir," Lieutenant Parker's voice crackled over the comm. "They're changing formation again. Looks like they finally figured out our counter to their standard urban warfare doctrine." Michael nodded, though his lieutenant couldn't see it. "Good. That means it's time to change the rules again." He switched to the battalion command channel. "All units, implement pattern Echo 7. I want every trap and ambush point relocated in the next hour." The beauty of human warfare, he'd learned, was its inherent chaos. The Orcs relied on complex AI systems to predict enemy behavior and calculate optimal attack patterns. But their computers couldn't account for human creativity. "Ghost actual to all points," he broadcast. "Remember, we're not just defending. We're teaching them a lesson about human adaptation. Make it hurt." The first sign that something was wrong came when the Orcs vanguard entered what their maps showed as a clear boulevard. In the 6 hours since their last attack, human combat engineers had transformed it into a killing zone. Buildings that had previously provided cover were now demolished, creating fields of fire that hadn't existed before. "Sentinel-2, you have permission to engage," Michael ordered, watching through his enhanced optics as the alien force struggled to process the completely altered battlefield. The archived footage from that day would show how the humans had turned urban combat into an art form. Orcs warriors, genetically engineered for strength and speed, found themselves caught in constantly shifting patterns of ambush and counterattack. Every time their combat AI adapted to a human tactic, the defenders would already be implementing something new. "Sir, we're getting some interesting chatter from their command channel," Communications Officer Rivera reported. "Their strategic AI is actually showing signs of stress. It can't keep up with our rate of tactical evolution." Michael had expected this. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our physical capabilities. It was our ability to learn and adapt in real time. Each engagement taught his soldiers something new, and they implemented those lessons immediately. "They're pulling back again," Parker reported. "But something's different this time. Their formation is hesitant." Through his tactical display, Michael watched as the Orcs forces retreated in an unusually disorganized pattern. Their normally precise movements were erratic, almost fearful. The alien commander's next transmission confirmed what he suspected. "This is impossible," the translated message read. "They're learning faster than our combat predictors can analyze. Every attack meets a different defense. How can they adapt so quickly?" Michael keyed his response on an open channel, wanting the entire alien force to hear it. "Welcome to human warfare. We've been adapting to overcome superior forces since we first picked up stones as weapons. Your mistake was thinking that technology could outpace evolution." The next hour proved his point, as the human defenders demonstrated why they'd earned their reputation. Streets that had been death traps became safe passages, while previously secure routes turned lethal. The Orcs never knew what to expect, because the humans never used the same tactic twice. Later, when the Orcs finally withdrew from New Petersburg, their after-action report would include a new classification for human combat doctrine: adaptive chaos warfare. The report noted that human soldiers possessed an almost supernatural ability to transform any environment into a weapon, making them the only known species that actually became more dangerous the longer a battle lasted. "You know what they're calling you now?" Parker asked as they watched the alien ships retreat into orbit. "The ghost of New Petersburg. They say fighting you is like fighting a spirit. No pattern, no predictability, just death from 1,000 unexpected directions. Michael continued watching the sky, already planning changes for the next battle. They still don't get it. We're not ghosts. We're humans, and we've spent our entire history learning how to win against the odds. The final addition to the Orcs report would become standard reading for all alien military forces. Warning: human defensive operations demonstrate exponential tactical evolution. Extended engagements are not recommended as human combat effectiveness increases with experience. There is no known counter to their rate of adaptation. The Orcs combat surgeon had never seen anything like it. The helmet camera footage playing on the medical station screen showed human soldiers from Echo Company not just surviving but fighting through injuries that should have been instantly fatal. The recording was marked classified, Titan's Rings incident, and bore the timestamp of humanity's most infamous counterattack. Lieutenant Jessica Fury Martinez felt the dropship shudder as another round of anti-aircraft fire tore through their hull. "Brace for impact," she shouted, watching emergency lights flood the troop bay. Echo Company, 40 strong, locked their harnesses as the ship began its death spiral through Titan's upper atmosphere. The crash should have killed them all. The Orcs defensive network had done its job, shredding their transport's engines and sending them plummeting through the moon's toxic atmosphere. By any rational assessment, the human counterattack had failed before it began. The alien medical officer's report continued. Subject Echo 1, Martinez, sustained multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a punctured lung on impact. Standard triage protocols would classify these injuries as fatal. However, post-incident analysis shows a massive surge of adrenaline, endorphins, and several unknown compounds flooding the subject's system. Jessica came to in the burning wreckage, her combat suit's medical system screaming warnings about her injuries. She could feel broken ribs grinding with every breath. But something more ancient than pain was taking over. Her body's emergency response system, honed by millions of years of evolution, began its work. "Echo Company, sound off," she called out, forcing herself to stand. One by one, her soldiers responded. They were battered, broken, but alive. More importantly, they were angry. The report notes, human combat effectiveness does not degrade proportionally with injury. Instead, severe trauma often triggers an enhancement of combat capabilities. This battle rage state appears to be an evolved response, allowing them to function at peak performance despite catastrophic damage to their bodies. "They think they killed us," Jessica broadcasted to her company, her voice steady despite the blood filling one lung. "Let's show them why you don't corner wounded humans." What followed would rewrite alien military doctrine regarding human combat operations. Echo Company, every member seriously injured, launched an assault on the very anti-aircraft battery that shot them down. Their movements were captured by Orcs security systems, showing humans operating at peak combat efficiency despite injuries that should have left them unconscious. The medical officer's analysis grew more concerned. Subjects displayed no normal response to pain stimuli during combat. Their endocrine system produces a complex chemical cocktail that not only blocks pain, but appears to enhance strength, speed, and aggression. Most disturbingly, this state is contagious within human units, spreading through social bonds to create what can only be described as a pack combat frenzy. Jessica led the charge personally, her body pumping out enough natural stimulants to kill most species. The Orcs defenders, expecting to find only wreckage, instead met a company of humans operating on pure battle rage. The fight was short, brutal, and entirely one-sided. Their biology makes no sense, the report concluded. Humans have evolved a combat response that prioritizes mission completion over personal survival. When wounded, they don't become less dangerous. They become more lethal, as if injury removes normal behavioral restraints. Hours later, after Echo Company had secured the anti-aircraft complex and medical evac finally arrived, the battalion surgeon found Jessica still at her post, directing defense operations, despite injuries that should have been fatal hours ago. "How are you still fighting?" he asked, reading her medical scans with disbelief. Jessica managed a pained smile as the combat stims finally began to wear off. "Because the mission wasn't done," she said simply, "and humans don't stop until the mission's done." The final addendum to the Orcsan medical report would become standard warning for all species. Human combat units must be considered operational until completely neutralized. Wounded humans are not disabled humans. They are humans with nothing left to lose, and therefore at their most dangerous. Standard combat doctrine must be modified when engaging human forces, as conventional battlefield injury assessments do not apply to this species. Staff Sergeant David "Doc" Anderson watched the thermal feed from the reconnaissance drone, his face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the display. Somewhere in the sprawling Orcsan prison complex below, 3 of his Marines were being held captive. The aliens had expected this to demoralize the 31st Marine Expeditionary Force. Instead, they'd just made the biggest mistake of the war. They'd got at least 2 battalions worth of forces down there. "Sarge," Private First Class Rachel Mouse Cooper whispered, her eyes never leaving her sniper scope, "plus automated defense systems and energy shields." David nodded, already planning. "And we've got 20 Marines who'd die for those 3 people in there." The numbers are in our favor. The Orcsan had never understood human pack bonding. Their intelligence reports dismissed it as a primitive tribal instinct, something that should have been bred out of an advanced species. They were about to learn why that assessment was fatally wrong. "All units, this is Doc," he broadcast on the secure channel. "Our people have been in there for 20 hours. That's 20 hours too long. We go in dark, we go in hard. And we don't stop until our family is home." The response was immediate. A chorus of acknowledgments from Marines who'd been together since boot camp. They weren't just a unit. They were a pack, bonded by training, combat, and something deeper that the aliens could never comprehend. The Orcsan Security Chief's report would later note, "Human military units display a level of social cohesion that defies logical analysis. They will consistently sacrifice tactical advantage, strategic position, and even their own lives to rescue captured comrades. Most disturbingly, this behavior actually increases their combat effectiveness." The attack began at local midnight. David led the first team through a maintenance tunnel that Mouse had discovered, moving with the silent precision that came from countless hours of training together. They could read each other's intentions from the smallest gestures, communicating complex tactics without speaking a word. "Contact front," Corporal Jake Whisper Mitchell signaled, his hand movements telling the whole story to his squad mates. 2 guards, standard patrol pattern, 5 seconds until they rounded the corner. What happened next would be studied in alien war colleges for generations. The security footage showed humans moving with impossible coordination, each soldier instinctively covering their teammates' blind spots. They weren't fighting as individuals. They were fighting as a single organism with 20 bodies. Primary control center breached. Lieutenant Sarah Valkyrie Reynolds reported through the comm. "Security systems are dark. They never saw us coming." The Orcsan commander's frantic transmissions revealed their growing terror. They're not acting like a military unit. They're acting like a pack of predators. Every time we adapt to one group's tactics, another strikes from an unexpected direction. How can they coordinate so perfectly without central command? David's team found their captured Marines in the high security wing, guarded by the prison's elite troops. The fight that followed was brief but intense, with the humans displaying what the Orcsan would later call aggressive pack protection behavior. "I don't understand," one of the captured guards said as David's team secured the area. "You had no strategic reason to risk this many assets for 3 soldiers." David checked the restraints on the guard before responding. "That's because you're thinking like a soldier. We're not just soldiers, we're family. And humans will burn down the galaxy to protect their family." The after-action report would include a special warning to all alien military forces. Do not attempt to use captured humans as leverage against their units. This strategy has a 100% failure rate and typically results in catastrophic losses for the capturing force. Human pack bonding creates a force multiplier that makes them exponentially more dangerous when fighting to rescue their own. Hours later, as the 31st MEF celebrated the successful rescue, an alien observer asked David why humans would risk so much for so few. "Because that's what family does," he said simply. "And every human soldier knows that if they're taken, their brothers and sisters will come for them. Not because of orders or strategy, but because that's who we are. We never leave our people behind." The observer's final note would become famous in military circles. The most dangerous force in the galaxy isn't human technology or human biology. It's human loyalty. They fight harder for each other than any species fights for victory. Major Emily Wraith Blackwood stood before the holographic display of the 7 systems, her eyes tracking the movement of Arxan fleet signatures. After 6 months of her psychological warfare campaign, the once mighty alien armada was beginning to show signs of something the Arxan had never experienced before. "Fear. Ma'am," Lieutenant Marcus Cipher Rodriguez called from his communication station. "We're picking up another wave of desertions from the enemy's 3rd Fleet. The Phantom Protocol is working better than we expected." Emily allowed herself a small smile. The Arxan had always believed their genetically engineered warriors were immune to psychological warfare. They'd never encountered a species that had turned fear into a science. "Show me the latest intercepts," she ordered, moving to the Intelligence Center's main screen. The messages scrolling across it told a story of an alien force coming apart at the seams. "They move like ghosts, never where our sensors say they should be. 3rd Battalion lost contact 2 days ago. When we found them, they'd turned their weapons on each other. The humans don't fight like warriors. They fight like the night terrors of our ancestral memories." The Arxan military psychologist's report was equally disturbing. "Human psychological warfare operates on levels we never considered possible. They don't just attack our communications or strategy. They attack the primal fear centers of our brains." Emily had spent years studying alien psychology before the war. She knew that every species, no matter how advanced, had deep-seated fears coded into their DNA. The Arxan, despite their technological superiority, were no different. "Launch Phase 3, she ordered. "Let's show them why humans are the galaxy's ultimate nightmare." The campaign that followed would redefine military doctrine across known space. Emily's teams deployed a mix of information warfare, targeted strikes, and carefully orchestrated terror tactics. They didn't just attack enemy positions, they attacked enemy minds. "The humans are inside our command network again," an Arxan general's transmission read. "But this time, they're not stealing data. They're leaving things. Messages, images, sounds that shouldn't exist. My crews are starting to break." Emily's masterstroke was the Phantom Protocol, a strategy that turned the Arxan's own technology against them. Their sensors would detect human forces that weren't there, while real human strike teams would appear where their systems showed empty space. "Status report on the Thorian sector," she called out. "Complete psychological collapse of enemy forces," Marcus reported. "They're seeing humans in every shadow now." 3 more ships surrendered this morning after their crews refused to keep fighting what they're calling the Ghost War. The alien tactical eyes assessment was equally grim. Human psychological warfare does not follow predictable patterns. They don't just create fear, they engineer it, shape it, turn it into a weapon more effective than any conventional arms. Emily reviewed the latest battle footage, watching Orcs and warriors, bred for fearlessness, break and run at the mere suggestion of human forces in their area. Her teams had created an almost mythological terror around human combat units. "How do you do it?" a captured Orcsan commander asked during interrogation. "How do you turn the void itself into a weapon against us?" Emily's response was characteristically direct. "Because humans understand fear better than any species in the galaxy. We don't just use it. We live with it, embrace it, and turn it against our enemies. Your mistake was thinking that fear is a weakness. In human hands, it's the ultimate weapon." The final intelligence report from the campaign would become required reading for all alien military forces. Human psychological warfare capabilities represent an unprecedented threat. They have demonstrated the ability to break even genetically enhanced morale through a combination of information warfare, strategic terror, and deep understanding of psychology. Standard defense protocols are ineffective against their methods. As the last Orcsan fleet retreated from the Seven Systems, Marcus turned to his commander. "They're calling you the Nightmare Queen now, ma'am. They say you taught the galaxy why humans are the most terrifying species in known space." Emily continued watching the retreat, already planning her next campaign. "We didn't teach them fear, Lieutenant. We just showed them why humans have always been what the darkness is afraid of." The Orcsan Military Academy's most advanced combat prediction AI was having a meltdown. On the main display, hundreds of battle simulations ran simultaneously, each trying to calculate the next move of Commander Ryan, Chaos Walker, during the defense of Alpha Centauri. Every single prediction had been wrong. "This makes no tactical sense," the chief military analyst reported, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "Commander Walker is deliberately making suboptimal choices, yet his success rate defies all mathematical models." In the command center of the Human Defense Station Bastion, Ryan studied the holographic battle map with a slight smile. The Orcsan fleet had deployed in a perfect formation, following textbook strategies that any military AI would consider optimal. That was exactly what he'd been waiting for. "All units, execute Operation Monkey Wrench," he broadcast. The response was immediate, though his officers had initially questioned the unorthodox plan. Human ships began moving in patterns that violated every known rule of space combat. "Sir," his XO, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Logic Matthews, reported with a grin, "the enemy's combat computers are showing signs of critical errors. They can't process our formation." The Orcsan battle report would later note, "Human combat tactics under Commander Walker appear to be deliberately designed to cause system failures in predictive combat AIs. They don't just defy prediction. They actively exploit the very concept of tactical analysis." Ryan had spent years studying how alien military doctrine relied on mathematical certainty. Their combat computers could calculate millions of possible scenarios per second, but they all shared one critical weakness. They assumed their enemy would make rational choices. "Launch Phase 2, he ordered. "Let's show them why they call me Chaos." What followed was a masterclass in human unpredictability. Ships performed maneuvers that seemed suicidal until the very last second. Strike teams appeared where no rational commander would deploy them. Every time, the Orcsan AI adapted to one pattern of illogical behavior, Ryan would switch to something even more outlandish. "Their flagship systems are in complete disarray," Sarah reported, monitoring the enemy's communications. "Their combat computers are throwing up error messages faster than they can clear them." One of their officers just asked if we're all insane. The alien tactical analysis grew more desperate. Human Commander Walker appears to be operating on what they called gut instinct, a decision-making process that defies computational analysis. More disturbing still, his forces follow these seemingly random commands without hesitation, as if they trust chaos more than logic. Ryan watched as his forces executed another impossibly timed maneuver, catching the enemy fleet in a three-dimensional crossfire that no simulation would have predicted. The beauty of human warfare, he'd always believed, was its embrace of the irrational. "Sir," a junior officer called out, "we're picking up some interesting chatter from their command ships. They're arguing about whether to override their combat AIs and fight on pure instinct." "Too late," Ryan replied. "They've spent too long relying on machines to think for them. They don't know how to trust their gut anymore." The final hours of the battle would be studied in war colleges across the galaxy. Human forces under Walker's command had achieved victory through moves that any military AI would have classified as tactically insane. The Orcs fleet, unable to adapt to strategies that defied mathematical analysis, fell into disarray. "How do you do it?" an Orcs commander asked during the surrender. "How do you fight without following any recognizable pattern?" Ryan's response was simple. "Because humans learned long ago that the most dangerous enemy is the one you can't predict. We don't just accept chaos. We weaponize it." The Orcs Military Academy's final report would include a warning. Attempting to apply traditional combat analysis to human warfare is futile. Their greatest strength lies in their ability to make decisions that no rational species would consider, yet achieve success through methods that defy computational understanding. In simple terms, humans have turned unpredictability into an art form. Master Sergeant Catherine Steele Harrison crouched behind the twisted remains of an Orcs battle tank, her battle-worn armor covered in the scorch marks of near misses. The alien command center loomed ahead, its shield generator pulsing with energy that made the air crackle. This was it, the final push that would end the war. "Steel actual to all units," she broadcast to her mixed-unit strike team. "This is what we trained for. Everything humanity has learned about combat comes down to the next hour." Her force was small by any strategic standard, just 50 human warriors drawn from various elite units, but they represented everything that made human soldiers the most lethal force in known space. "Remember your training," she continued. "We've got rangers who can fight through any injury, force recon marines who can hunt for days, spec ops who can adapt to any situation, and psychological warfare specialists who've got the enemy jumping at shadows. We are everything the galaxy fears about human combat potential." The Orcs High Command had fortified their position with everything they had left. Automated defense systems, elite guard units, and combat AIs that had been reprogrammed countless times to try to counter human tactics. None of it would be enough. "All elements report ready." Her XO, Lieutenant James Shadow Parker, confirmed. "The enemy's still trying to predict our attack vector." Catherine smiled behind her visor. "Then let's show them why that's pointless. Execute Operation Thunderstrike." What followed would be recorded in the final chapter of the war. 50 humans launched an attack that demonstrated every reason why their species had become the galaxy's ultimate warriors. The Rangers led the charge, shrugging off wounds that should have been fatal as their bodies pumped out combat stimulants that would kill any other species. Behind them, Force recon teams moved with the relentless pace that had earned humans their reputation as unstoppable hunters. "They're adapting to our defense grid," an Orcs commander transmitted in panic. "Every time we establish a pattern, they change their approach. It's like fighting quantum uncertainty given physical form." Catherine's team had spent weeks psychologically preparing the enemy for this moment. Random attacks, mysterious communications, and strategic terror had left the Orcs defenders looking for threats in every shadow. Now, those shadows came alive with human warriors. "Breach teams, you're up," she ordered, watching as her soldiers demonstrated the perfect unit cohesion that came from human pack bonding. They moved like parts of a single organism, each warrior instinctively covering their teammates without need for orders. The Orcs combat AI tried to predict their movements, but human unpredictability proved impossible to calculate. Every time it established a defense pattern, the humans would do something that defied tactical logic yet somehow succeeded. Main shield is down, Shadow reported, but we've got heavy resistance in the command center. Catherine keyed her general channel. All units, remember what we are. We're not just soldiers. We're the product of every battle humanity has ever fought. Show them why that makes us unstoppable. The final assault demonstrated why humans had revolutionized warfare. Her warriors adapted their tactics in real time, used their environment in ways no training could predict, and fought with the terrifying determination that came from absolute unit cohesion. Hours later, as the Orcs in High Command surrendered, their supreme commander asked the question that had haunted their species since first contact. What are you? What makes human soldiers so different from every other species? Catherine removed her helmet, meeting the alien's four-eyed gaze. We're the end result of evolution on a death world, where every step of our development was forged in combat. We're persistence hunters who never stop, pack hunters who die for our unit, and tool users who can turn anything into a weapon. We're the species that turned warfare into an art form. The final entry in the Galactic Military Archives would read, "Let this record stand as both warning and testament. Human soldiers represent the perfect synthesis of physical evolution, psychological adaptation, and combat innovation. They are not simply warriors. They are what happens when a species evolves with war in its blood. To face them in combat is to face the most dangerous force the galaxy has ever known."